Welcome to the Whiskey Congress. Honest, open talk dedicated to speaking the truth to those who are open to hearing it. Black, white, right, left. Most importantly, honest, bold, and fueled by good whiskey. In Whiskey Veritas, we are Whiskey Congress. Join the evolution.
Whiskey Congress is back in session after a relatively long recess, but Steve and I are together in the Cleveland studio. We've got a lot going on in our personal lives. We won't get into that, but a lot's gone on in the public life as well while we were gone. But first of all, Steven, how are you?
Good. Happy to be in Ohio after some time out of the state for the week. So good to be back. Well, even though it's fucking miserable here with the weather.
It is. Well, you missed out on some of the really awful stuff, I think.
Yeah.
You weren't there with those negative days. Okay.
I was not.
It was fucking ridiculously frigid. Like, it was just miserable. You're absolutely right using that term. All right, man. So Trump has been sworn in. His first week has been an eventful one. A lot of executive orders. I hate that we have to go right down that path, but I don't see that we have much of a choice. So which one do you want to talk about first?
Well, I mean, I think it's clear to see based off the executive orders that they're clearly following that path of the Project 2025 document that laid out, the president's Trump's transition plan once he got back into the White House. That's the document was a roadmap saying this is what he's going to do. Now, he denied knowing what it was, which we all knew was a lie.
It also should be disqualifying. If you don't know what it is, how the fuck are you running for president?
Well,
I know.
Yeah, I mean, now
I know, but
you could also make an argument that, like, look, I mean, why do I need to know if he doesn't know what it is, right? And it's not something that he commissioned, right? Why would he waste time on it, right?
Oh, come on. You and I knew about it, and we're not running for president.
We understand that he's lying, but what I'm saying is, let's just say it was because if it were Barack Obama. Right, and he was like, I don't know, some idiots wrote it, and I'm not paying any attention to it. Right, I think we'd be more inclined to believe him, but he's got a track record of at least being, a lot more honest than Trump and believable. My point is that document, either way, whether he knew about it or not, we know what it is. Right, we knew what it was, and we are clearly seeing that that's the roadmap. And the other point is that it doesn't matter. Right, whether he knew what it was or not. I mean, we could argue over. Well, if you didn't know, it's disqualified. It doesn't matter, right?
Right. It doesn't. I'm not, of course, nothing.
Because
reality doesn't matter.
Right. I mean, because he's been elected. He's clearly executing that plan, and so arguing over whether he knew about it or not doesn't matter because there's no way to even hold him to account.
I'm not arguing whether he knew about it. I'm saying that if you're in that position that you're running for president of the United States, you should know what the fuck it is. But I don't want to argue with you about that. So
yeah,
go on.
Because we obviously know that he knew what it was. But if you go through and you look at the executive orders that initiated, so immigration is the big one, right? Kind of out of the gate, and I think it's so they're definitely doing it. ICE is raiding, businesses. I know they tried to get into some schools, and some of the schools in like Chicago and DC kind of pushed back a little bit. A lot actually not letting the agents in, and there's Homeland, there's ICE. Everybody is kind of fighting over this. We're seeing immigrants of all statuses, right, whether they're legal or not, in fear.
Right.
There've already been some people who shouldn't have been rounded up who have been rounded up. There've been, I think they flew roughly 300 people out, which is very much under the numbers that they were boasting. There's been some debates over the cost of this, right?
Right.
And using military planes, and Mexico is saying, well, you're trying to fly a military plane into our country to drop off people. We have no idea who you're dropping off. No, you can't come in.
I think they even said you can't use our airspace.
Right.
So,
yeah, so, I mean, and a couple other countries have said no as well, and, the MAGA talking heads on social media are throwing a temper tantrum like, oh, you're going to pay the price. Like, what are you going to do, right? I mean, because here's the issue, and, people are like, oh, you can sanction the shit out of Mexico. Yeah, you can, but you know who Mexico's best buddy is right now?
China?
China.
Yeah.
Right? So all you're doing, right, is pushing Mexico further into the arms of China. Right? Like, I mean, if you want to do this and you want to hit them with tariffs until they accept these planes of illegal immigrants, and Mexico's argument is, are these people even from Mexico?
And typically, no, right? Typically,
Right, a lot of these
Central American
right.
countries.
It's a lot of these people are not from Mexico, right? Like, so you're just sending them back just because it's Mexico, right? And we just have this assumption that all the people coming over the border are trying to escape the cartels, or in the cartels trying to get into the U.S. But there's people from all over Central America, as you stated, in other countries. The other interesting thing about this is there's a lot of other illegal immigrants besides Mexicans and Central Americans, right? Like, there's illegal Russians and there's illegal Irish and Polish and Eastern European and everything else, and those communities are not being hit. Those communities are not having people.
Wait, how are they different?
I mean, it's just it's really interesting.
I'm sorry to just interrupt, but I want to throw one thing out there. China is sitting back and loving this. China is Michael Jackson eating the popcorn with all this. And they're also, China is buying a ton of Russian assets because Russia needs money to fund their war. So China is on the, we and the Russians are making China safely and quietly much more popowerful.
Yeah, we've been doing that for the last 5 to 10 years.
Right.
I
think this is an upscale.
Yeah, I mean, and it's
scale up, sorry.
I think what's happened is that China's been laying the groundwork for this for at least a decade or more. Probably the last 20 years. And now they are seeing the fruits of their labor, which is being accelerated by Trump, by Putin, by just this ridiculous culture war that Trump and even Trump is really leading the charge, and Putin has helped throwing gas on the fire. But you're right, China is sitting back and just saying, all right, just give it all to me.
Buying Russian mines, taking ownership of Russia.
I mean, even some of the stuff
Mexico.
Because what China's doing is they're basically waging a soft war where it's not about your weapons, it's not about your soldiers in training, it's about tech, it's about assets, it's about renewable resources, non-renewable resources. It's about the view of currency, how money is spent, where money is spent, isolating the U.S., kind of playing both sides of the fence with Russia to a degree, right? Because they're kind of keeping Russia at bay just enough so that when Russia completely collapses, they don't get sucked down with them, right? But they can also be there to play hero to help save Russia if they need to, if they want to, helping to sort of distract from, their want to kind of overtake Taiwan. There's a lot of stuff that they're doing, even the way that they're dealing with technology, with TikTok, with AI. China just released a massive number of different AI tools that rival ChatGPT, Copilot, and all those different things that are cheaper and just as effective, and in some case more effective. And we're just like, okay, why does that matter? ChatGPT, to use the premium top end, is like $30-$50 a month, right? But what China is releasing is cheaper right now, free and open source, and performs just as well at many tasks. Right now, it's got to be used more so it could learn more and adapt more, right? But essentially, like, that is something that could be adopted by people in the U.S., right? And then they start to charge for it. The money goes back to a hedge fund that goes to China, which we all know goes back to the CCP. So they are waging a war across so many different fronts that have nothing to do with actually fighting a battle with bullets, right? And they're winning, and they're outpacing us. And right now, our leadership is playing right into their hands.
Yes.
And starting with this immigration thing, how they're handling these deportations. Not only are they raiding and sending people back to different places, maybe where they're from, maybe not, but they're also trying to kind of go back against birthright citizenship, and they hit a wall where the court's just like, whoa, hold on, right? We're not just gonna just cross out things.
We still have a Constitution.
Right, we're just not going to cross things off the Constitution that we don't like here. We still have a process, right? Like, we're more than willing to work with you, but you at least have to pretend to go through the process and not just think that you can just come in like you're a king and say and do whatever you want. So we'll see how some of this stuff plays out in court.
I want to say something else about the ICE and immigration situation. In addition to what they're actually doing, what their actions and what Trump's words are doing is causing tremendous fear in those communities, and a lot of our agriculture depends on migrant workers. And now I've heard stories about like 50% of workforces in certain places are not showing up because they're afraid if they show up to work, they're going to get deported. Well, when you stop harvesting crops, supply goes down, demand stays the same or goes up, prices go up, so it's going to cause more inflation, hurt you more at the grocery store. And unlike when there's a strike at an automotive plant, you can make up for lost time. You can do overtime. There's ways to make up for it. This stuff literally rots on the tree, rots on the vine. And so
it's got to go through a growth cycle to get it back again.
Right.
Right.
And so the impact is going to be immediate and potentially overflowing because we got to go through it again. And there's a growing season. You know, we have perfected agriculture. Well, perfected is definitely not the word I should have used. We have modified agriculture to serve us year-round in ways that was not that way when I was a kid. But there's only so much science and technology can do. You fuck this up, and then I have a fear that if stuff rots on a tree, if there's a blight and rotted fruit causes blights to come out, we have a blight on our citrus or blight on anything that impacts us, it could be a massive, really, really awful, impactful thing. All right, I'm done with my agricultural rant.
So the agricultural thing is potentially even bigger than that. And the reason why is we're yet to really see and feel the impact of the sort of fear factor as it relates to the immigration deportations.
Right.
You know, what you're saying is logical, somewhat theoretical. We're hearing anecdotal stories, but we'll really start to see the impact of that in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, right?
Agreed, yeah.
If the impact, you know, if the right smoke signals are sent from farmers, agricultural, saying you kind of need to back off, you're going to put us in a situation here, then there's a chance that they may be able to ease fears and get people back working and sort of salvage this. Maybe.
True.
Right?
Yeah, it's not.
But one, I don't trust that this administration would listen to those smoke signals, so I think they'll continue to sort of put the full court press on. But the other issue is that you've got this bird flu that's going around that's causing poultry farms to wipe out chickens by the hundreds, by the thousands.
No, 5 million is the number I read.
Right. I mean, I'm just saying per facility, right? You know, chickens, ducks, you know, cows are having to be slaughtered. And so you've got this situation where the cost of chicken, eggs, beef, all are probably going to go up because of this H1N1 bird flu thing. You have the other impact of, you know, reduced labor in the agricultural field, the ability to harvest these crops, the ability, like, so not only do you have those immediate impacts, but the other issue is, let's say this drags on for 6 months, right? This fear factor where we're talking about the workers not showing up, and then we're still dealing with this bird flu. Well, these farmers have mortgages, they've got debt, they've got to pay bills, and if they can't do it, the farms shut down, right? So even if, let's say 6, 7, 8 months from now, we say, all right, we got it all straightened out. Well, if the farms had to shut down because they just could not continue to make things work and the banks go after them and there's not a bailout for the farmers to keep them going, right? Because I have to imagine that that's coming, but if it's not enough or it doesn't come in time, well,
yeah,
we saw this.
That's a very good point.
We saw this with oil, right? Right. During COVID, we had this massive sort of drop off of demand, right? And so literally nobody's driving, no one's using gas. Gas prices plummet, which Trump, he takes that as a credit, by the way.
Sure, I know.
Gas prices dropped, right? Well, because nobody was driving, there was no demand, right? That's not you. But then when demand went back up, the problem was that many of the refineries had closed and shut down, and it takes time to get refineries back up and running again. Some went out of business, got bought by others, right? So that impacted the ability to provide supply, right? Now we opened things up, we were able to get things back going, but that took time, right? And there was an impact on everybody's wallet, right, when it came to gas. And gas is lower than what it was, right, at its sort of peak, but it's still a lot higher than what it was, kind of at its lowest. So you could have a similar effect in the agriculture world, right, where now you maybe have solved the problem for the bird flu and you've solved the problem with the immigrant workers, but if you've lost farms where they can actually go in and work, right, well, it's going to still be hard to meet the supply even if you have the labor, and it's going to be even harder because, again, growth cycles and getting the land ready and harvesting it and preparing it and everything else, it's going to, what you're going to see is people think grocery prices are high now. You think $9 for a dozen eggs is high. That's going to go up. The cost of beef is going to go up. And for a person who eats a lot of protein like myself, none of these things are good. Right. Yeah. And this is all right here. And neither one of us are economic doctors and PhDs and everything else. But I mean, that's basic economics that anybody could see. And I'm sure the guys who really get paid to analyze this stuff can tell you how dark it could potentially get. And we have a very small window to sort of prevent that from happening. And I don't know if the administration has that sort of foresight.
And then we're going to talk about the fact that Trump is surrounding himself with nothing but, sycophants is the word that comes to mind.
Yeah, that's the right word. Yes men, sycophants. People that are going to. But here's the other thing, though. A lot of this stuff isn't coming from Trump.
I was about to go there. Yeah.
Right? So he's hiring people that are not only sycophants, but they have their own very specific agenda. And they're feeding him. Right? They're saying, look, use your style of delivery to deliver this message.
Yeah.
And Trump's not doing a deep dive on it, right? Like Obama would sit there and go through and say, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. I don't like this. I don't like that. Because from a policy standpoint, Trump's doing it on a popularity standpoint. Policy and popularity are two different things, right? But the people that are around Trump, the Stephen Millers, the Stephen Bannons,
Steve's are the problem.
Sorry, is it Steve Miller?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Steve's are the problem.
Yeah. But you look at the people that are surrounding him. You look at the people, the Elon Musk. You look at the Pam Bondis. You look at the Pete Hegseth, who he was just confirmed as the Secretary of Defense. You look at these types of people, you look at what they've said, how they view government and how they viewed sort of the old regime, the Biden regime, and pretty much anything that wasn't Trump was bad, right?
Right.
Unless it was Ronald Reagan, right? Ronald Reagan is fine. I think, there's probably some out there that'll say Nixon was good, but other than that, the rest of the presidents sucked, and then they'll go back and say Andrew Jackson was great and George Washington was great. But then everyone else is bad, right? And so they're trying to do this sort of redesign of what the federal government looks like, what the president's office looks like, the amount of control that the president has. They want to focus that to be very Trump specific. And what they're also I've already seen things where they're trying to figure out how to get Trump a third term.
Okay.
Right. And and it's just where does that go? I don't know, but it's hard to say, well, they're not going to try. We know they're at least going to try.
Right.
The level, in the past, it would have been a 99% chance, hell no, that's going to happen. And now I feel it's legit 50-50.
And what's funny is the way that's written, it would exclude Obama and George W. Bush because they wrote it so that if you were president once, had consecutive terms. Right, consecutive terms, you couldn't do it. I want to validate what you said a minute ago about Trump not being the mastermind behind this. He put that on video. There's literally video of him having someone walk up with an executive order, open it for him to sign and say, this is an executive order to do this. This is an executive order to release the JFK files. Oh, that's a big one. He's literally just sitting there getting handed stuff. He's signing things with the level of inspection and awareness that everyone does when they sign a mortgage. Like, here's your tax thing, here's your this, here's your that. And you're not going to sit there and read all 800 pages of it. He's just slapping his signature on there.
John Hancock on it.
Yep. And so if anyone disputes what you said about him just following what his puppet masters are doing, he showed you video of it.
Now, to that point, I mean, look, one, we do know that Trump is a showman, right? Like, so
Yeah.
he's going to try to turn everything into,
Sure.
like a fireside chat. Oh, look at this. This is fun. This is new. And some would argue, like, oh, yeah, he's going back and he's doing this deep dive review, but then he just puts on an act. Like, look, one, yes, you're right. He is putting on an act. Two, he has not read any of this.
Agreed.
Right? Like, someone has literally, like, we have a whiteboard with an outline of the different topics of the show that we're going to talk about. That's about what Trump reads on all this shit, right? And he's like, oh, that looks good. That sounds good. What is this? Okay, that sounds good. All right, good. Let's go.
Yep.
Ready, set, action.
I just wanted to provide visual evidence of what you just said.
So going through some of these other executive orders, you've got this foreign aid freeze, to literally global foreign aid, which not only includes weapons, it includes food, it includes shelter, it includes everything that we're doing around the world to help those in need, to help those who keep us safe, protect, all the foreign aid shut off, except Israel and Egypt. And,
Why Egypt?
well, Egypt is...
I understand they're strategic but they're an antagonist to Israel typically.
But not with the Palestinians, right?
That's true.
The Egyptians do not like the Palestinians, and there's a long history that is probably a 25-hour podcast on the history of the Palestinians and the Egyptians and the Israelis and everything else. But right now, Israel and Egypt, in terms of turning away Hamas, seem to be the main focus, right? That's why Egypt's in there. So. And I think the whole thing with everywhere except Israel should raise some eyebrows, right?
Should.
I don't know if it's getting quite enough attention. I mean, in the social media world, it is, but, the social media world is so siloed in such an echo chamber at this point that I'm not sure what the point is, right? Because no one is being objective, right? Like, it's just all mudslinging, but they also... So here's another one that I find interesting, is this sort of rollback of DEI.
Right.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. So they basically said get rid of any form of DEI on the federal level, right? Any and all programs. It's possibly going to have an impact on veterans, the Veteran Affairs Office, or the Office of Veteran Affairs, Veterans Benefits, Veteran Jobs, Veteran Job... preference.
Okay.
Right? Like, so if you're, a disabled veteran, you get a preference, and if they roll back DEI like they have, then no, you don't. Right? And so there are veterans that are already sort of decrying this because as soon as this executive order went through, right, like, oh, I applied for a job, I got I'm veteran status and disabled, it's just like, boop.
Right. When Republicans talk about DEI, it's all about race and sexual orientation, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Right, and so a part of that is that Trump also revoked the equal employment opportunity executive order that LBJ signed in 1965, which basically says you can't be discriminatory when hiring in federal jobs, right? Like you can't
based on age, sexual orientation, gender.
Yes, and Trump removed that executive order, which I think is also interesting. Which it seems like they're pretty much saying the quiet part out loud at this point, right?
Yeah, the need to hide it seems because no one's listening.
Right. I mean, it's just like, look, you want to get rid of DEI, all right, diversity, equity, inclusion programs, okay, fine. I guess we don't need to tell people to not be racist or whatever, okay, fine. But I think it's interesting how this is being played out, right? Like, so in the Air Force... they show a training video that talks a lot about the Tuskegee Airmen, right? The Tuskegee Airmen were a segregated black group of fighter pilots that, would make sure that the bombers would get from point A to point B. They never lost a bomber from enemy fire. They did lose a couple due to ground fire, but that's not really in their control. But they were some of the best pilots in World War II. They were really good black pilots. They were some of the best pilots in World War II, right? There are multiple white pilots that have come out and said over the last, 80 years that these guys were the best, that they knew if they were flying with the Red Tails, right, the Tuskegee Airmen, that they were going to get to where they needed to go because those guys were the best, right? This wasn't DEI, right? This wasn't about diversity and inclusion. This was the exact opposite.
They were excluded, and then
this was like, look, we need extra bodies, but we don't want to fight with y'all niggas, so y'all do it yourself. And those guys turned out to be some of the best in the fucking Air Force. That's not DEI. If anything, that should be what these dipshits should be fucking promoting, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. Like, that whole program was the exact opposite of DEI, and it turned out fucking great, right? For those pilots, for the Air Force, for America, for the world, because without them, we probably don't win World War II if we're being honest, right? So the idea that you're going to take out this story of these amazing fucking pilots, like, you don't even have to talk about, fine, you don't want to acknowledge the fact that they were black, right? You can just say, hey, these are the guys who did it.
Right.
They just all happen to be a little darker than everybody else, but we're not talking about that. But they were really good at what they did, right? When you go through the number of medals and the accommodations and everything that they got, and you take into account the number that they didn't get because they were black, right? And they still stacked up. I mean,
the Army was segregated at that point, so it was literally...
and this is the Air Force, right?
Okay.
Right? But whatever.
Military.
Right, the whole military, the United States was segregated.
Well, there's that.
Right, from the top down. So it's wild to me that they're saying, yeah, we're going to talk, we are willing, this is literally cut off your nose to spite your face, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what it tells you is that the DEI, because what they didn't think about was the impact on the veterans, right? But what they're giddy about is, yeah, we don't have to talk about Tuskegee Airmen, right? Meanwhile, the veterans are like, hey, I'm a white dude, right? My wife is white. She there was a guy whose wife, she applied for a job at the VA to be a nurse or something like that, and her application gets pulled, right? And there was an explanation as to why, right? Now, what everyone, all the MAGA people, and they're saying, oh, well, we're just pausing everything, and everything is under review, right, till it gets approval, because we got to make sure it meets our standards, and then everything will go back to normal, once we make the necessary changes. But some of this stuff we know is never going to get reviewed, is never going to go back, right? And it's had the chilling effect that they wanted it to have, right? And basically, we know that everything moves in these very short 24-hour news cycles, and people move on, the administration moves on, the administration moves with momentum, right? Like, so they'll weather the storm of people being upset about the Tuskegee Airmen and about the, but then something else will happen in a week or two that'll move everyone past it, and then this doesn't come back, right? And so, again, the chilling effect that Project 2025 was supposed to have is happening in real time right now in front of our faces.
Yeah. Yep, we saw it coming. They broadcasted they were going to do it. A lot of people denied that it was a big deal. And this is what I'm about to say might sound kind of stupid, but one of the things in Project 2025 is making pornography illegal. So basically, in my mind, Project 2025 is basically like, how do we gain and maintain endless power and turn our country into a theocratic oligarchy? And that's what they want, and they're taking the steps.
But Jim, how could it be an oligarchy? It's not like we've got billionaires that have access to our government that are controlling policy.
Elon Musk. No, Elon Musk is not going to be given a West Wing office, and apparently he's throwing a tantrum about it. But he's got ridiculous influence. He had ridiculous influence.
He still has access to the White House. He can still get in, no
I just
problems.
think it's funny that they're saying, no, you don't get to sit in you're sitting at the kids' table, but keep that money coming.
Well, that's his chief of staff. That's Trump's chief of staff who made that decision.
Right. Who will probably get fired in a month anyway.
Likely, right? Like, I mean, if she's already, and who knows, right? Like, she may be the
voice of reason?
No.
Okay.
No, she could. I mean, she may be worse than we realize, right? Like, she may not like the fact that Elon Musk was hoarding in on her territory. So get out of here, bub.
Yeah,
get out of here, right? I'll be the one in Trump's ear, not you. so that could be like people are looking at her like, oh, well, she's the voice of reason. Nah, not so fast, my friends.
Okay.
So going back to some of these DEIs, these executive orders with the DEI, he also obviously is coming out against trans people. We only recognize 2 genders in the federal government. No more hiring of trans people in the federal government, military. Hasn't kicked trans people out of serving in the military, but they're reviewing it, making it likely that at some point in time that ban on transgender participation in the military will eventually come back, and those people will be pushed out. It's a scary time because things that people said would never happen are happening.
Right.
Or things that people were giddy about happening that you said, man, really don't want that to happen, are happening. And they're rapidly trying to insulate themselves, being the Trump administration, putting these executive orders in place, knowing that they've got a favorable Congress, they've got a favorable Senate, they've got a favorable Supreme Court, to be able to continue to push things through and not only have them as executive orders, but get some of this stuff passed as law. Trump is talking about eliminating the income tax or eliminating the IRS and having a flat tax, which, look, if they put in a 10% flat tax for everybody across the board, I don't know how mad I'm going to be about that, if we're being honest.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
What's funny is the people who hate that are the ultra wealthy.
Right, because they're paying less than that.
Right.
I mean, like they put everybody pays a flat 15% tax across the board, or because the other thing he said is getting rid of the IRS, getting rid of the income tax altogether, and then just increasing a tax on all purchased goods, like adding like a 20% tax on everything that you purchase. So everything gets more expensive, but you have less taken out of your paycheck. Which, if you work a 9 to 5, great. If you're an independent contractor, like
me,
the 2 of us, well, then it's great. Everything just got more expensive, right?
Right.
Tax write-offs and everything else go away, right?
Yeah.
But now just everything is more expensive. So, interesting to see where that goes. I haven't heard him. The only thing that I really wanted to hear out of this guy, right? Look, he doesn't have many. Trump and his administration don't have really many redeeming qualities for me. This IRS thing and the tax, I'm willing to sort of hear out, we still need to fund our government, but he's saying the tariffs will fund it, which I think the tariffs are a terrible idea. We have a whole law, so we don't do that again.
That's another 25-hour podcast.
But at the same time, it's just like, look, if you introduce this flat tax and we're getting rid of tax cuts and everything, okay. But the only other thing that I really wanted to hear as a Second Amendment guy was him getting rid of the ATF. And I haven't heard it yet.
Okay, you're not going to hear that. You know what?
No.
Let me take that back.
There's already been a congressman who's introduced the bill to abolish the ATF. I don't think it goes anywhere. But it would be interesting to see where that goes. Me don't like the ATF.
Well, as someone who likes alcohol, you're a fan of tobacco, and we both like firearms.
Cigar industry did get a big win today, this week though.
Really?
Yeah, I won't drag us down the because it's a very technical legal case on premium cigars and taxing them and everything else, and it was about to make my hobby way more expensive. But for right now, it has been put at bay. So yay.
Okay, good for you.
But some other things. So he also fired a bunch of inspector generals.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Okay, so I've heard that word used before, but I didn't know much about it until these firings. These are people, federal employees, who are appointed by the president or sometimes by departments within the government under the executive to monitor, watchdog the Department of Defense and Homeland Security and all these other departments. And it's basically an anti-corruption job. Now, he fired 17 inspector generals with just an email. I asked the question, how many are there in the country? Like, how big of an impact? There are over 70 is what I've come up with. I don't know. I mean, over 70, I think, means more than 70, less than 80. Roughly 25% of the inspectors general, several of whom were Trump appointees who remained through the Biden administration. And this just opens the door for corruption in these departments because and I don't even think I have to call this speculation, the people who get appointed to those positions are going to be Trump loyalists. So I'm expecting folks like Elon Musk and Donald Trump, who at times probably have to worry about what's going to happen when they're getting massive amounts of money.
I think you skipped a step.
What did I skip?
I don't know if they get replaced.
Oh. Okay. Well, that makes oversight that much easier, doesn't it?
Just drag your feet.
Yeah? All right.
I didn't like them.
They're gone.
And was it that he didn't like the individuals as much as he didn't want, he didn't care whether they were loyalists or not. He just didn't want somebody in that position and that over that particular office
over the shoulder.
Or that particular agency.
Yeah, you're right. So I gave Trump too much credit. My bad. Not a typical flaw of mine.
Or you didn't give him enough, right? Crazy like a fox.
Yeah.
I'm going to fire all these people because I don't like them because they weren't loyal to me. And I'm going to replace them with... What was that? I'm going to...
Yeah.
Hey, when are you going to replace them? Yeah, we got a big, beautiful plan on replacing them. It's coming. Right. Right with that healthcare plan I promised you fucking 20 years ago. Right.
Yep. No, good call. Yeah, all right. So thanks. It's worse than I thought. I was feeling fairly good. Okay, no, I wasn't. All right, I wasn't feeling good, and now I feel worse.
Don't piss on my back. Actually, you're just pissing in my face, and you're not calling it rain. You're just pissing in my face. Awesome.
Okay. No, I'm glad you said that. It's 100% accurate. I'm boy.
Yeah.
All right.
So he also pardoned everybody from January 6th.
Right.
Which, not that big of a surprise. It's interesting. The MAGA diehard loyalists are just like, yay, this is great. But this did shake a few loose, right?
It did. Because beating up cops is...
Yeah, beating up cops, typically bad by most people's standards. But amongst legitimate conservatives, that's a no-go. So, I mean, it irritated some in his own camp. Not as many as we would like. There were a few people who received the pardons that basically categorically rejected them.
Yeah.
Which is very hard to do. This is something I've got a little bit of experience in. And rejecting a presidential pardon there's very little precedent for it. And so, but I think it's a good sign, and those stories need to be put out there because the people who rejected them are saying, like, look, I did the thing that I was charged with and that I served time for, and I was wrong. I was, like, multiple people are all saying the same thing. I was wrong.
And most of them are out of prison by now.
Right. Like, I was in a cult.
Yeah.
I, got caught up in the moment. I did things that under no circumstances would I deem acceptable if anyone did them under any other circumstances, even like circumstances. Right. One guy, went in and broke into someone's office and, drank their whiskey. And, when the officers told him to leave, he kept drinking the whiskey and the officer, pulled him out and everything else. You've got the guys who beat up the cops, choked cops, and, those cops ended up dead, killing themselves.
Cops' faces.
Right. Just horrible. I mean, leaders of the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and, people who literally conspired against the government, but they did it in the name of Trump. So he's like, all right, I'm just going to pardon everybody. You had the guy with the buffalo hat, Jacob Eidsley or whatever.
Yeah.
The MAGA shaman.
QAnon shaman.
That guy was just like, yeah, great. Now I'm going to go buy some guns.
Chansley.
Yeah. Just a sad day,
yeah.
really.
And I have a ton of respect for Michael Fanone, who was one of the D.C. cops he was beaten up, he was tased, he suffered a heart attack on January 6th, and when the leader of the Proud Boys, I think it was the Proud Boys, it might have been the Oath Keepers, came out and said basically he's starting his revenge tour, Michael Fanone's response to him was, go fuck yourself. He said it on CNN, which I loved. But you look at that guy, I mean, he's a veteran, a military veteran, I believe a combat veteran. What he went through on January 6th dramatically impacted his life in a very negative way. He nearly died. And for these back the blue people to look at that guy and tell him, well, you're a liar. It didn't really happen that way. Like, we've seen the video of it. There's no speculation here. We saw it, and I will tee off on anyone who claims they're back the blue and a Trump supporter using his name. In fact, I would say I'd love to get him on the show, but he's going on CNN. He's probably not going to come talk to us. Maybe I'll reach out. But I've heard him tell what happened that day. I've seen videos to support it, and it is disgusting. I mean, if Trump would have come in and said anyone who was not involved in violent acts was being released, I'd still have a problem with that, because January 6th is something that I get irate about very easily, and it fucking infuriates me that people don't look at that as what it is. It was an attempt to destroy our democracy, period. He lost an election. He was too much of a fucking baby to accept it, so he said, here's our last-ditch effort to stop this. You know, they were chanting hang Mike Pence. I have no reason to believe if they'd gotten hold of Mike Pence that they wouldn't have. And if you're okay with murdering your Republican vice president because he doesn't violate the Constitution, at least own it, say that, and then don't ever fucking talk to me about being pro-America, pro-Constitution, pro-freedom, whatever. All right, I'm going to stop with my rant, but it's absolutely infuriating to me that January 6th didn't take everyone who was involved with it politically, I forget the congressman who was pumping his fist towards the people rioting, and then ran and hid like a bitch, who I won't, if I don't come up with a name for certain, I won't say it because he's called him a bitch, but it disgusts me that didn't end the political careers of people who claim to be fucking patriots. All right, I said my rant was done, and I'm ready to
I mean, look, that's anybody with common sense, decency, some form of objectivity, agree with you, right? And some of these MAGA people are trying to go to, well, this is a big conspiracy. It was Antifa, Black Lives Matter. It was
the FBI inspired it. Well, that's my favorite one. The FBI told them to do it.
Right. Like so.
Okay.
So what, you did it. Right. Like so, they're like, oh well, they removed the gates and they opened the doors, so we just went in and then proceeded to break windows and hurt people and kick people and beat police. Right. Like the FBI told you to beat that cop with a flagpole. Right. The FBI told you to break windows and climb through doors and run after. They at one point. What's crazy is you got people like Josh Hawley, who they were literally chasing through the halls, and he ran like a bitch. To hide behind a police officer.
Is that who I was talking about? Maybe it was Holly who was pumping his fist.
Yeah, I mean, It's like, what are we doing here? I mean, the one person that we had was Mitt Romney, right? Who was standing toe to toe with people. He was one of the few people that actually stood up and told people to get the fuck out. Like, when Mitt Romney is your last line of defense besides the D.C. police, like, that is and you got combat veterans in Congress and in the Senate who didn't do shit that day.
Yeah.
Look, I get it. Like, it was a mob of people and everything else, but you are a U.S. military combat veteran. And we know who I'm talking about. Whether it's Holly or whether it's One-Eyed Willie or,
okay.
The rest. He got one eye. He's made fun of it. Him and what's his nuts. I don't care, right? And in that moment, where the fuck was he? Now, maybe Holly wasn't there, but I'm pretty sure he had to have been there, right? Because
sure.
Right, like they were there, and what did they do? They hid. They did nothing, right?
Which, by the way, if a mob was threatening to hang the vice president who's in my party, I get why they were scared.
No, here's the thing. You ran and hid from these people. Right? So the idea that you're just going to sit there and be like, oh, yeah, it's fine that they're pardoned. Really?
Right.
Bro, if you come after me to the point where I got to hide for hours while you fucking ransack my office and shit on my desk, you think I'm going to just sit there and just be like, yeah, totally, yeah, pardon them. Right? At least say something. Like, that's the thing that is fucking wild to me. Right? That these people are just going to sit there and be like, oh, yeah, that's totally fine. Totally cool. Right? Like, I would be on MSNBC, Fox News, all this saying, like, this is completely unacceptable.
Well, and you've got J.D. Vance, who previously said that anyone involved in violent acts on January 6th should not be pardoned, and he's running and hiding from Trump now. I mean, vice presidents, frankly, don't typically have a lot of visibility.
And it's just like they're trying to what they're trying to do is with JD Vance is substantiate their attacks on Kamala Harris, right? Because what they said about Kamala Harris is that they used her to get the presidency for Biden, and then they basically packaged her up and hid her away because she didn't have experience in foreign policy and she's kind of ditzy and blah, 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 right? We didn't hear anything from her for most of Biden's thing, and then they put her in and blah, blah, blah. So what they're doing is pushing J.D. Vance out there, making sure that even after the election, he's still in the spotlight. He's still out there. He's doing the interviews that Kamala wouldn't do, and he's engaging with the media so that they can show, like, look, he's a part of the plan, blah, 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 even though we know that he's not, and he is just going to be the whipping boy, insert the Veep music, right? Which is terrifying how more accurate that show seems than...
I've been rewatching it. It's a fucking great show.
It is so fucking funny. That whole cast, man. Every time I see one of them like in another movie, it cracks me up. But it just that was one that I expected, but it doesn't make it any less disappointing and infuriating that it happened.
Right.
Those people shouldn't be part.
And it can't be undone.
No, it can't be undone. Were there some people that were overcharged and got an unfair shake? Yeah, I could say that. Like, I followed those trials very closely, and some of those people, now look, I can only be so empathetic towards them because, look, you absolutely put yourself in an awful situation by being there, breaching the threshold, you knew you weren't supposed to be in there, right? And if you broke something, you stole something, you defaced something, right? However you did it, whatever you used to do it, right? You hurt someone, you deserve what you got, right? Yeah. Now, if you're a person who just kind of was there, just kind of walking around, and they got you on camera kind of going in and poking your head around, and then you walked out, but you got hit with a trespassing charge that, you had to go to jail for 30 days for, I don't love it. I don't love it because just look, as an advocate for criminal justice reform, and seeing how people have been abused in the system forever, and that's why this show started.
Yeah,
was talking about the need for criminal justice reform.
Yes. Right.
So on the one hand, I can't sit there and say we need this criminal justice reform. We have to stop overcharging. We have to start. Like, I can't take pleasure in people getting overly and undue punished because I don't agree with their politics.
Right.
And I think there were some instances of that, and it's not right. It's not fair. So I guess in a way, this pardon situation sort of balances it. But, you've got people that committed some serious violent crime against police officers, against government officials in the nation's capital building.
Right. And we should talk briefly about Biden did a bunch of exit or last-minute pardons as well, including his brother, his son, and Anthony Fauci among them. Now, I've had a few people go, why did you pardon Fauci if you didn't do anything? Here's why. Because Trump basically said, I'm putting a bullseye on Fauci because he's a bad guy. And so
because it's very simple. Biden knew that there was going to be retaliation towards people that, Trump didn't like.
Yep.
I still think it's insane that Biden's son gets this much attention. Someone who never worked for the government, never had an official title, was literally just a fucking patsy, an addict, and a dipshit.
Yeah.
Right? And so we're going to sit here and waste time and money on this guy, throw his ass in rehab for a year, and let's move the fuck on.
Agreed.
Right?
I mean, you know where I stand on that. Like, I don't give a fuck.
How dare he made money? It's like, God, do you guys really want to go down the who made money off the government, knowing what we know about Trump and his whole fucking family? Jared Kushner, Ivanka. Right. Come on, what are we really doing here?
All right, man. It's good to be back in the studio with you. Let's talk some football. So it is a few hours. It is 5 hours until...
Start with the one we both agree with.
Okay. The Ohio State University are the NCAA football champions. And, that ended up being a really fun game, too. because it was. I was at a bar watching it with some friends. We decided to hop to a different bar, and it was like when we went to the next bar, the whole script got flipped. Ohio State was dominating. I think they were up 21.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, it's, and I had put money on Buckeyes and them covering, so I was like, okay,
we're good.
I'm happy, we're good. And then the second half happened, and it got real interesting. And oddly, I won. The Buckeyes covered because of that last-second field goal, which was the right football play, but there were people in the bar that took Notre Dame who were losing their shit.
Yeah.
Now, you were in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I was in Vegas, watched it at Circa. Whew, man, that sports book is just amazing.
It's sick. I mean, we went
Two-tier,
there a couple years ago.
double-decker, stadium seating, comfortable seating, got food delivered to the seats. Right there, got a couple drink tickets. I gave my drink tickets to people around me. Actually, I got a bottle of soda water, which was a drink ticket, but whatever.
Right.
But it was, it was a cool experience. I would say the crowd was about 50-50. Heavy fans, both Ohio State, Notre Dame. Obviously, first half, Ohio State comes out just firing like Ohio State. And, listen, Notre Dame comes out on the first drive, and they basically go to Navy's offense.
Right.
Right?
Quarterback runs.
Right, like quarterback runs or whatever. And it's just like, look, if that's what you're going to do all game, then good luck because, you're just going to get outpaced. Ohio State's going to score 3 touchdowns for your every one, which is basically kind of the way it played out. Then Notre Dame opens up the offense a little bit. I think Ohio State got hit with a lot of penalties in pass coverage. And that was really sort of the thing that brought Ohio State back into the game. Notre Dame back into the game. Notre Dame made some good plays, especially in that third quarter.
And they were legitimate calls, at least.
The calls, yes. Yeah. I'm not saying that they were bad, but they still happened, and that's really what sort of allows Notre Dame to get back into the game. And then Notre Dame starts to open it up and say, fuck it, we don't have a lot of time. They start taking the chances. They start doing the things. But what I saw out of this Ohio State team was that these guys, everyone's thing was, what are these guys going to do when they see adversity? They haven't seen adversity all year, and they haven't seen adversity in these playoffs. I'm like, look, they actually have seen adversity. They saw it in Oregon when they went out there and lose a close game because the quarterback loses his mind and just decides to run instead of throwing the ball away. But then, obviously, they see it again against Michigan, where, they played with their assholes tight. Defense actually played a great game against Michigan, but the offense just kind of buckled.
Yep.
And so this team has seen adversity. They saw it firsthand. Just because they didn't see it in the playoffs, it means they learned from those experiences against Oregon and against Michigan. So when they come out the way they did against Tennessee, right, and then against Oregon, right, and then Texas, right, like. Yeah. I'm sorry, like these guys are battle tested, and a lot of people talk about the money on the roster and everything else. Okay, fine, but if you look at that defense was all 4 5-year Ohio State starters, save for 1 or 2 guys. Right? They had 1 or 2 guys that they brought over, but like 9 out of the 11 were 4 to 5 guys who had been at Ohio State for 4 to 5 years. Right? You had a lot of guys on the offense who had been there for an extended period of time. Smith and Jigba, Henderson. A couple of the linemen. So you had a team that just was firing on all cylinders, and then they did get punched in they got punched back after they delivered the first blow. They got punched back, but they responded. They bowed their necks. Defense came out, played tough, made plays late. Offense came out. Smith makes that huge play along the sideline from a throw from Will Howard. Now people are talking about Will Howard like being, a top 5 quarterback in this draft, which I don't see. The dude can't run without falling down. But he did throw some good passes. I think maybe he could turn into something. I don't know. But what I do know, he's a national champion, and you can't take that from him or anybody on that team or Ryan Day. So I think Ryan Day's job is safe for now.
Yeah, I told you before we got on the air that people at the bar were saying if Ryan Day loses to Michigan next year, does he get fired? And I was like, I literally yelled out, he just won a national fucking championship. Can you stop? I mean, fire Ryan Day has been overdone.
I mean, look, the only concern would be, I think, is, if Ryan Day left to take the New Orleans Saints job, right? That's the only NFL job opening that's still left. I don't see that.
I would be shocked.
Right? Now, the question is, like, look, Ohio State's going to lose so many people. I mean, you're going to lose most of your defense, right? Jack Sawyer's gone. Tua's gone. Like most of that defense is gone. So you're going to have to replace a lot of people.
Oh, it could be a big step back next year.
Offensive-wise, you're going to have to get a new quarterback. And I know they've got 3 or 4 waiting in the wings, but we'll see how that plays out. You're losing linemen. You're losing both your running backs. You're losing Ibuka at receiver. Like, you're losing a lot, right? Like, so you're probably
Ohio State typically does reload rather than rebuild.
They do, but you're talking about probably replacing 16 out of 22 starters.
Yeah. Oh, it's gonna be a big task for sure.
And I've also heard Jim Knowles who's the defensive coordinator, getting talked about going to the NFL. I've also heard Chip Kelly being considered for offensive coordinator positions back in the NFL. So you could be replacing a lot next year. And if you're replacing 15 to 16 starters and both your coordinators, I think the expectations for Ohio State have to be level set.
Good thing is Ohio State fans are rational. And
So moving on to the NFL.
Yes.
We've got first game up today is Commanders-Eagles. What time is that game?
3:00. So we're a couple hours, an hour and a half to kickoff.
So we got Commanders and Eagles. You got Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, that defense.
Saquon
Barkley, right? Against Commanders, who got Jaden Daniels, who, I don't think there's any argument he's going to be Offensive Rookie of the Year. Dude has played lights out. Broke Ben Roethlisberger for record for number of wins as a rookie. As a rookie, has his team in the NFC Championship game against a team that they've already beat this year once. And they're playing they are playing themselves lights out, scored 45 points against the Lions, who decimated by injury, but still were a very good team. And they got scary Terry McLaurin, who is from
the Ohio State University.
So I think it'll be an interesting game. Now, I've kind of hedged my bets for these two games. I don't have a dog in this fight, so I've actually I've bet 3 different ways on this game.
Okay.
Right, so I think that any one of those combinations should be able to hit, right, and be a winner.
An executive order that you're not allowed to bet.
Yeah, I made 3 $3 bets with different combinations that should be. Now, what would be hilarious if not one of them hit? Right, like
when you hedge your bets,
right? Like, how the fuck do you hedge your bet 3 fucking ways and still lose? But it's possible.
It's definitely possible.
I've definitely done it before. But realistically, I feel like the way the Commanders are playing, the way their defense is playing, because people are like, oh, they're a young team. They are, but they have some experienced people at key positions. Like, you've got Bobby Wagner in the middle for the Commanders, who's the inside linebacker who played forever out in Seattle, and is just a guy who, he's 35, 36 years old, and he's not quite as fast as he once was, but, like I've said this before about a lot of guys, 80% of Bobby Wagner is still 90% is better than 90% of the league, right?
Sure.
And so their defense is playing better. They've gotten tighter. And frankly, their offense can just do what it wants. Jaden Daniels has an arm that can make all the throws. He just has no pulse. The kid at no point in time ever looks like he's stressed, no matter what's happening. Like, he could be being chased by a fucking cheetah, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna keep going, give you a little stiff arm, and then, but boom, 40-yard pass. And you're just like, all right, well, that's annoying. The kid is good. The Eagles, their defense has been playing lights out, but my concerns are Jalen Hurts is injured. He got hurt in that last game. And their offense can get a little messy in the pass game.
Yeah.
And if he's injured and he can't step into throws or he can't use his escapability, that could limit their offense a little bit, because then you can just focus more on Saquon Barkley if you're not worried about Jalen Hurts pulling it and running it. And if you can do that, then you can sort of flood the zone. You bring pressure up the middle because Jalen Hurts is going to have trouble trying to escape. And that could be problematic for the Eagles. I am leaning towards the Commanders in this game. So I've actually got them a couple different ways, right? I've got one where I've got them just winning outright, and I've got them
covering, getting the 6 points.
Yeah, getting
Not
the 6
covering,
points.
but,
Yeah. So,
I bet on them with the 6 points. I think it's going to be a very close game. Jaden Daniels has exceeded expectations, and I think the word on the street is, well, Washington's playing with house money, but in that locker room they're saying we're one win away from the fucking Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear, oh, you've exceeded expectations, good for you.
Look,
we are
and you've
one
got a
win
coach
from the Super Bowl.
You got a coach who's been to a Super Bowl, right? Been to a couple Super
Yep.
Bowls, right? Dan Quinn won Super Bowls in Seattle. Dan Quinn went to a Super Bowl with the
Denver.
Falcons.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
No, they lost. They lose that game. Matt Ryan. They come back against the Patriots. What's his name? Julian Edelman makes a ridiculous catch, and Patriots come back and win that game. But Dan Quinn is a guy who's been there. He's got people on his staff who've been there. Again, like I said, you've got a guy like a Bobby Wagner on that defense who can hold people down. You've got a guy on offense in. Your tight end, Zach Ertz.
Right.
Former Eagle, who's won a Super Bowl, who's seen a lot of success in the league. You've got Austin Eckler, who, not a lot of playoff experience, but a veteran who's been around. Yep. So this team, even though the quarterback is a rookie and it's a team that was very bad last year but has come up this year, they sort of rebuilt in the right way. I did see a funny article that Dan Snyder is absolutely livid that this team is that good, and I love it. I love that for him.
Me too.
I hope it ruins his night's sleep every night for
on his mega yacht. But
so then we got your big game, Kansas City and the Bills.
Yep, is why I will be stress drinking from the end of this broadcast until kickoff.
Terrible idea.
It is a terrible idea, but good decisions are my thing. That's a Bill Squire joke that I just stole. I think we were a worse matchup against Baltimore than we are against KC. I was very, very concerned about the Baltimore game.
And you should have been. I mean, look, Mark Andrews dropping that 2-point conversion is pretty much probably the reason why you're still in the playoffs, because you guys weren't going to stop him in overtime the way the offense was.
Well, we had a minute and a half with 2 timeouts left, so we could have marched for a field goal and won the game in regulation. But maybe not.
But at that point, momentum's not on your side.
Correct.
And I just think that look, it chances are it probably goes to overtime, and chances are either way, it doesn't matter. It didn't happen.
Yep.
I do think that the Bills are a better matchup against KC. You already played them once this year and you beat them. Now, I know it's hard to beat a team twice in a year, but at the same time, I just think it's not a great matchup for Kansas City. Now, Travis Kelce has come back to life, so that will be an issue, and Taylor Rapp is out for you guys, which is an issue.
Sure.
Especially with covering the tight ends. But
we're going to have a rookie covering him, but that rookie is known for covering tight ends. Cole Bishop is.
Yeah. I mean, so it's not the end of the world. But I just think that the issue is KC has had a lot of success against teams that don't have great quarterbacks, right? That have good quarterbacks, but not really that can go toe-to-toe with Mahomes. And I think that while their defense has been very good this year, you guys exposed their defense.
Right the ball on our throat.
Yeah, I mean, and even Baltimore exposed them in the opening game of the season, but couldn't obviously get back because they lost to you guys. And so, I think the Bills should win this game.
I'm not going to make a prediction because
the Bill. I feel like the Bills should win this game.
For the audience, I'm decked out in Bills gear, and that the only thing I'm not wearing is the hat that'll be going out to watch the game.
I do have them. I've got them winning outright, and then in another one, I've got them covering
1.5.
Yeah, I mean, which is tricky. I probably should have stayed away from that one, but whatever. But I think the Bills do win, but you always just have that Pat Mahomes, Andy Reid, Kansas City sort of
Jason from Friday the 13th. They're not dead until they're fucking dead.
I mean, it's just they are now that team like the Patriots were, like the Cowboys were,
right.
the 49ers were. That it's just like for whatever reason, like they just
always
somehow
find a way
to win. But I think that if there was going to be a year that they were not going to be able to get to the Super Bowl, this feels like it could be it, right? Like it feels like Allen is just playing at a very high level. It seems like your defense is timely and effective.
Yep. Not super stout, but they take the ball away a lot.
Right.
And they make big plays when it counts.
And look, Kansas City is playing well, but again, if you can, even if you allow Travis Kelce to sort of dominate the game, if you can keep everyone else at bay at Kansas City, the Bills have the firepower to basically just outpace the Chiefs from a scoring standpoint.
You know, that's what I want. My surprise player of the game for Buffalo, if they do it, is Dalton Kincaid. I guess KC's defense does not do well against tight ends. Dalton Kincaid has been, frankly, disappointing this year, but he's a talented young tight end with, good after the catch abilities, and if he has a big game, I'm not going to be shocked, and I put a bet on him to score 2 touchdowns.
Ooh.
$5 to win a shit ton.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say, just watching the Bills, I think his season being disappointing is not completely on him. Josh Allen just got really good at distributing the ball this year. Like, he is just throwing to the open guy. And
he threw touchdowns to 14 different receivers this year.
I mean,
one of them was him.
Yeah, that was still bizarre. But I think once they got rid of Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis was gone, Josh Allen was kind of forced to say, like, all right, well, I don't have to focus on any one or two guys. I've got the entire field open to me. And that's really what makes these – when a quarterback gets to that point where he's just throwing to the guy who's open, right? Who's open for the smartest gain, right? Like, you could have a guy who's open downfield, but maybe your body's not in the right position to get the ball to him, but you got a guy open at the next level, then you throw it to the guy at the next level. Right, where it's not just home run or dump off, right? And I'm a Steeler fan. Russell Wilson had 2 throws, moonball home run or dump off to the guy 2 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. There was not much more beyond that, which is why we could not advance the football moving forward, right? But Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, even Jalen Hurts, like all these remaining quarterbacks will throw to whatever guy is open,
right?
And then if everybody is covered, and if they don't feel that they can throw a guy open, then they will take off and run.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And that's what all these remaining guys do.
And, during the season as a Bills fan, we're always like, Josh, don't get hurt. Don't run so much. Right now, go be Superman.
All bets are off, man.
Go be Superman.
All bets are off for the next 2 weeks. There is no tomorrow. You put it all on the line. And so it's going to be an exciting day of football. Looking forward to it. Good luck for you and the Bills.
Go Bills.
Me and my bets.
And your bets. And I think we're done.
We're done.